Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session on financial aid and the pledge to advance Connecticut for the CT state system. My name is Ajit Gopalakrishnan. I am the Chief Performance Officer for the Connecticut State Department of Education, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Stephen McDowell Jr. from the CT state system. And Stephen, I'm not sure of your exact title.
Thanks, Ajit. I appreciate that. I'm the Associate Vice President for Financial Aid Services and Title IV Compliance with CT State.
Great, great. Thank you so much again for joining and for supporting this work. We are increasing our partnership with our friends at the CSCU system. Today we're doing the session on financial aid and PACT, and tomorrow we're doing a session on the automatic admissions program. So, we continue to work closely with our higher ed partners. When we look at our data in terms of college enrollment, one of the things that is striking with the pandemic is for years we've had consistent college enrollment patterns, and with the pandemic we've seen obviously declines. You've heard those things nationally, but also in Connecticut, particularly for students from low-income families. We've seen that for 2 years in a row, both for the class of 2020, the high school graduating class of 2020, and the class of 2021, we saw declines in that enrollment. So we know that financial aid and supports like PACT are instrumental in stemming that tide and encouraging more of our students to pursue post-secondary opportunities. We know that many of you are FAFSA challenge schools and are participating in the CSD's FAFSA challenge to help complete FAFSA, so that again, that barrier to potential barrier to higher education is at least seemed that can be overcome for our students so that they can pursue this post-secondary options. So again, thank you so much for joining to listen to this session. The way this will work, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen momentarily. The chat is open, so as he's presenting, if you have any questions, please use the chat. I'll sort of orally ask them just to keep the discussion going. And when Stephen is done with this presentation, there will also be an opportunity for you to use the raise hand option in the reaction section, and I will call on you. I can unmute you and you can actually orally ask your question as well. So again, thank you so much for joining, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen McDowell.
Great, thank you so much. And give me just a minute here and pull up my presentation. Okay. All right, can everybody see that there?
Great, yes, great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so just a little bit about me. Like I said before, my name is Steve McDowell. I'm the Associate Vice President for Financial Aid Services and Title IV Compliance. The running joke is that I'm still looking for a clever acronym for the title because there's just so many consonants and it's just a mouthful to get across. A little bit about me: I am a certified financial aid administrator through the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. I am a certified strategic enrollment manager through the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. Earlier this year, I had written a book that came out. It's called Basic Guide to Financial Aid. If you're really interested in kind of what goes into the administrative side of financial aid, I'd encourage you to read it. It's available on Amazon. And then I do have my Bachelor of Science in Finance from Bentley University right outside of Boston, and my Master of Business Administration from the University of Hartford here right here in Connecticut. So the biggest thing that we wanted to get across here is that Connecticut State Community College is on its way to being formulated officially. So we've done a lot of work in the past 5 or so years to get through this transition. There's a piece of it that deals with accreditation through NECHI, and then there's another piece of it that deals with the U.S. Department of Education, which is more my wheelhouse. So right now we're targeting a finalization date for our merger at July 1st, 2023, which seems like a long way away, but when you've been working on it for so long, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel coming extremely quickly. The date might be a little interesting to you because they said July 1st of next year, when you all are well aware that the FAFSA for the fall 23, spring 24 semesters came out in October 2022. So just a quick recap: it's based on income and tax information from 2021. My sincere recommendation would be that for students and families who have interesting financial situations or changes, that you recommend they don't substitute on their own their 2022 income tax information. We do a review called a professional judgment, which takes into account different situations for students. A parent lost their job. There's other expenses that are extraordinary under the circumstances, and we can take a look at those one by one, rather than having you make the adjustment on your own. The biggest takeaway that I'd like to give you all for today has to do with our federal school code on the FAFSA. So right now, if you have a student go to complete their FAFSA, targeting to go to CT State for fall 23, we still have 12 active federal school codes. So if you have a student that's looking to go to Tunxus's school code will be there. If you have one looking to go to Housatonic's code will be there. For CT State, we will only have one federal school code. It's right there on the screen in big giant bold letters, 007635. Right now, when a student goes to enter that number, it's going to come up as Capital Community College. And right now that is Capital's active school code. But what happens is we ultimately settle on one school code, but it doesn't get finalized until the Department of Education finalizes the merger. So, right now, if you have a student who enters Tunxus's code, we won't process their financial aid application. We'll have to ask them to go in and re-enter this code so we can receive it. And we have a bunch of different communication avenues to reach students who do this. But we will need all students to use this particular school code starting for fall 23. So, we're doing and this is kind of how this whole presentation took shape, was with Ajit recognizing that we may need a little bit of assistance from his area. And from you all to help get this point across, because we see annually more than 50,000 FAFSAs come into our just community colleges collectively, and it is a big endeavor when you think about it to try to funnel all those folks right into a single lane. So just please keep that in mind if you have students, encouraging them to do their FAFSA to use this school code for fall 23. So just to recap, we won't be processing any of the FAFSAs sent to the other 11 school codes. We will have outreach campaigns to help those students, find their lane with the right school code. So we've started to take in some FAFSAs already for the 23-24 semester for those students who have submitted it to the correct school code. We're planning on delivering award notifications to students in March of 23. Once we provide packaging, we don't off the top of our head distribute loans right away. We do have student loans available for students who need it. We also have a free college program, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to help mitigate some of that debt. But primarily we look to fund our students with grant dollars for their tuition fees and their books and supplies. And I will say, we have over, I want to say 77% was the last statistic made, that students receive some form of financial aid, whether it's a grant or a work study award or a loan if need be. So the financial aid for us comes from a few different sources. We have our federal sources, which most folks are probably familiar with, the federal Pell Grant. We have the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which is available for students who are designated as the most needy according to the federal formula. We do have federal work study programs, and we also have some student labor programs that are local to the campuses. And we do offer direct loans. Those come in a subsidized and unsubsidized format, where the government does and does not subsidize the interest for the student loans. We also have Parent Plus loans, where parents take out loans for students to cover the cost of their program. But it is a credit-based loan where parents do need their credit checks, and the interest rates are a touch higher than just the sub and the unsub. For state programs, we have the Roberta B. Willis Scholarship Program. That comes in two different flavors. One is a need-based and one is a need merit-based. So the schools make the determination on the need-based award, while the Office of Higher Education works to award the need merit scholarships to students who are eligible for that program. We also have the Pledge to Advance Connecticut program, which is our free college program, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. We also have some institutional funding available, and that's in the form of our Connecticut State Grant. So that's available to students who demonstrate need by completing the FAFSA. You might also be aware that students who are ineligible to complete a FAFSA can complete our aid application for Connecticut Undocumented Students, or ACTUS. So based on some state legislation that came out a couple of years back, we're allowed to take a section of our institutional grant money and make it available to these students. So they're not forced to put their information out of federal form if there's fear of if they're undocumented or what have you of being found. They do have this ability to do the secondary application to still receive financial aid that is an actual grant that does not have to be repaid. So the Pledge to Advance Connecticut program is available to first-time students as of fall 2020. You can essentially graduate from CT State or any community college debt-free for tuition and fees. Some of the different strategies you can think about this, if you have students that are thinking about, a 4-year degree, coming to a community college for the first 2 years, you can earn a 4-year degree for the price of 2. You can help preserve some of your federal loan eligibility, especially if you have a student who's eligible for some subsidized funding to preserve some of that. About PACT in general. An easier way to navigate this, if you go to ct.edu and hover over the admission section, we have a different tab for financial aid that will talk about all the different things related to PACT. So what does a student need to do to be eligible for PACT? They need to be a Connecticut resident. They need to have graduated from a Connecticut high school. As of this current fall semester, students can be full or part-time, which means they need to be enrolled in at least 6 credits. A student must be enrolled in a financial aid eligible program. The student has to complete a FAFSA annually. Students need to maintain satisfactory academic progress, and essentially what that is maintaining a certain threshold for GPA and a pace of completion for completing their courses. Students must be continuously enrolled in both fall and spring terms. And for students who may need accommodations, they're on an IEP, they have a 504. If a student's only able to take 1 course, that's okay. I mean, as long as they're working with our ADA offices and our disability coordinators, we see that oftentimes students who have those accommodations in high school maybe don't think they need them in college, don't think they apply in college. Those are real things that can work to their benefit. We have a number of students who take advantage of the PACT program, especially before part-time eligibility was available, where they can only take 6 credits and still receive PACT funding. So just make sure if you have students who fall into that category, they do have that ability to still receive PACT. So a lot of the common questions that we see is that students and families are seeking the application. There is no separate application. That's why it's never really found. So all a student really needs to do is apply to the college and do their FAFSA. Those are the 2 biggest pieces of PACT eligibility, aside from registration and things like that. PACT by law is not available for any summer sessions. So we see a lot of questions around that, but we can't give PACT out for summer. In the same breath, we cannot use PACT to cover books or supplies. It's only mandated to be used for tuition and fees. And then one of the bigger questions that'll probably serve this population in particular is if you have students who earn dual credit from taking college courses while they're in high school, or if you have a high school graduate who takes a college course in the summer, are they still able to get PACT? And the answer is yes. We'd still consider them a first-time college student when they come to us in the fall semester. So it is okay if a student has some college credits taken before they come to us once they graduate from high school. Just some other things to keep in mind, that PACT is a state appropriated fund. So, like many state funded things, it's dependent on how much money is allocated to us to be able to award to students. We do operate on priority deadlines. So, we're institutions that are open access. So it's largely based on a first come, first served model. While we don't hold up things like a Pell Grant, because that's an entitlement fund. If you have a student who's eligible, we 1000% give it to them without question. We do run out of things like institutional aid. We do run out of things like the Roberta Willis Need-Based Scholarship. And we do run out of things like the PACT money. So, while the FAFSA comes out on October 1st, you can have that tax information available because it's 2 years in arrears. I would highly encourage anybody to complete that FAFSA as soon as possible. make sure they get registered as soon as they can. And, these aren't necessarily hard and fast deadlines, but, the one thing I want to illustrate is that we do, as a community college, see a lot of students who show up for the first time to us, the week or two before school starts. And at that point, we can't guarantee that this funding is available. So that I would encourage to apply early, apply often, and just make sure that FAFSA is done every year. So we typically award this PACT grant when all of the criteria are met for the program. So we know that the FAFSA is complete. We know that they've submitted any other required documentation that we've asked to see, whether it's required federally or to satisfy some other areas. We look to see that that student's registered for at least 6 credits. And then how do we determine what the actual dollar amount is for students? So there's the real benefit of the PACT program here, and I will be strongly biased here and say that this program is arguably one of the most favorable among those available in the United States. If you have a student whose tuition and fees are already covered by existing grant aid, so for example, if you have a student who's eligible for the most amount of a Pell Grant, they don't have any tuition fees to be covered by PACT, but if they're full-time, we will give them a $250 award. Or if they're part-time, we'll give them a $150 award, and that's per semester. If you have a student whose tuition and fees are not covered by existing aid, we'll give them the balance that's due. So for example, if you have a student who's got a $2,000 bill, they receive an existing grant of $1,000, PACT will cover the other $1,000. Or if you have a student who's got a $2,000 bill, they don't have any grant dollars, we'll give them the $2,000 in a PACT award. Things that we don't consider when funding PACT: if a student's got a work study award, we don't count that. And if a student's got a student loan, we don't count that against PACT either. So how does a student maintain eligibility? I mean, the biggest thing we've seen over the past 2+ years is that a student doesn't know they have to do a FAFSA every year. They think that they do it just the first time and that's it. And, I see Ajit nodding his head down in the corner. That's, that's one of the biggest issues that we see is it's not a 1 year, it's not just a 1 year thing, it's an every year thing. The student needs to maintain satisfactory academic progress, and I have some links at the end that'll share with you what our exact policy is with the certain thresholds. And then the other one we see is that a student needs to be continuously enrolled for at least 6 credits in the fall and spring. So the way the legislation is written is if you have a student who attends in fall that's eligible, and then they take a semester off in the spring, when they take that semester off, they also lose their eligibility in the program because they've not met that continuous enrollment threshold. We do have an appeal system available too if students have extenuating circumstances. They have a family member that passed away, something else extraordinary happened. We understand that life happens. We understand that these things occur, and we'd encourage those students to work through that process if needed. The other thing to understand is that PACT is durational. It is available to students for their first 72 credits that are earned over the first 48 months. So they have 4 years to complete. If you're going part-time, clearly you'll need more than 2 years to get through. But if you're going full-time, you fail a course or something happens, you need to withdraw. You do have some extra time built in there to finish. One thing I would encourage you all to take a look at is available on our website. It's our financial aid guide. We include this with all of our student award notifications. We blast this out as much as we can so students are aware of what our financial aid office is all about and what their responsibilities are as students participate in the financial aid program. So it's got our overview, our purpose. It talks about the different rights and responsibilities as students, the different aid policies that they need to know and be aware of, different resources for other scholarships and things like that, and then a lot of the common questions that we see in the FAQ section. One thing I'll say is that students come with very unique situations. The FAQs tend to be some of the questions we see on repeat quite frequently. But financial aid exists in every color of the rainbow. The answers are not always as concrete as they may seem. They're not always black and white. So anytime a student or a family has a question, I would always encourage them to ask the financial aid office. Every student and family situation is unique, and we're certainly available to help as much and as often as we can. Just some quick contact information. This is me right at the top. This is my direct email address. This is my direct phone number. If you all have any questions, I am more than happy to get in touch with you. More than happy to speak to you one-on-one or what other areas you may need. Below that are different campus financial aid offices. Their contact information is all available in that financial aid guide, and there's the link in there too to find that. And then our CT State website, which is on the rise, up and coming. It's starting to be built, but there are some areas that are available for viewing. And you can check that out at www.ctstate.edu. So with that said, that's all I have as part of this presentation, and I am absolutely more than happy to take any questions or comments that you all might have.
Wonderful, Stephen. Thank you so much again for making the time to give this clear presentation. Let me just kick it off with a couple of questions that I know I heard when your folks presented at the Performance Matters Forum on PACT. And I want to go back to that FAFSA deadline, not the hard deadlines, but those kind of
The priority dates. Yes.
Yeah, the priority dates. And I think that the point, one of the points that was mentioned was, don't wait till July 14th to fill out your FAFSA, because there is a time lag from when you submit the FAFSA to when it gets processed, potentially some questions, et cetera. So could you maybe speak to, those are the deadlines, but folks should really complete their FAFSA as well in advance of those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to reiterate, the FAFSA comes out on October 1st every year for the following fall. So students have a significant lead time, to do that application, even if they need to go in and make adjustments or make amendments, additions, or what have you. Just to speak to Ajit's point, once a student family submits a FAFSA, it's not a done deal. And that's a common misconception that I think the entire financial aid community, sees. The student can be selected for verification. We might need to validate a student's citizenship, and that requires us to go out to different, federal agencies for validation. Sometimes they can take a few days, sometimes they can take a few weeks. A lot of it too depends on the reactiveness of a student, how quickly they can turn around the documents that we need. So, just because a student does a FAFSA doesn't necessarily mean that their job is done. We send and communicate with a student through their college email address once they've applied to the college. They have a self-service account that they can check out, any time of day, any time of night if they're awake, to see what they need. We have more than 50 staff that are available to help service students. But the biggest point I can reiterate is don't wait until the last minute. Don't have students and families put off filling out the FAFSA. One, it could cost them in the long run if by chance we've expended some grant money. I know we have one particular college who runs out of their institutional award money by July. And that's for the fall and the spring, because there's a demand for it. So I would encourage folks to get in early, get in often, make sure their financial aid, all the requirements are met. They've done everything that we've asked them to do. We don't ask for, extraordinary things that aren't required. Everything we ask for is, what the government asks us to do as part of the aid process. We do see a fair amount of students who, they see a deadline is July 15th. So, Ajit, like you said, they'll at, 10:30 at night do their FAFSA on July 14th. And there is a processing time. The department takes 1 to 3 days to process it. We bring in FAFSA files for review daily, but that doesn't mean that the department bed processes them daily. So there is a lag. Just be aware of that. We, as a generalization, use 3 to 5 days from the time they submit, because different things could happen. It could be a weekend, and processing could be slow, and hiccups and things like that. So early and often is the best advice I can give.
I know through the FAFSA challenge work, we have learned about reasons why a FAFSA may not make it through, like there's a typo in the SSN, or your resident, maybe you have the student has a parent in another state and they submitted that address, and then the FAFSA goes to the other state, et cetera. There's lots of things that can happen. There's a few other questions. There was one from Kieran Turney during the session, just more about logistics and tomorrow's session. Kieran, I'm posting the information about tomorrow's session, including a registration, so you can register for that. And again, in terms of, I'm not sure what your role is, but we do send such information. We've started sending it to superintendents, principals, and high school counselors. So we'll continue to sort of target our communications to those 3 groups for now. There's a question from Kelly White in the chat. Stephen, our school code is incorrect on the CT State application. Who can I speak to in order to rectify this?
You can speak to me, and I will certainly do that. The school code, again, for if a student is coming for, they're applying for this current fall 22 semester, spring 23, or summer 23, it's going to be that individual college's school code. But if it's for fall 23 and beyond, it's going to be that 007635 number. So there is going to be a distinction if you have a student who might be starting in the spring or the summer looking for aid versus the fall of 23.
Linda Carlson on the has raised her hand. Linda, your mic is enabled now, so you should be able to unmute and ask your question. Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, yeah. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So when you were saying to be eligible, you have to be Connecticut high school graduates. So I work in a transition program where our students have completed all of their high school requirements. So they're technically eligible to graduate, but they don't take their diploma because they're continuing in transition. And often if they have some kind of disabilities, we support them in college. Would they still be eligible for PACT if they have not taken their diploma?
The short answer is yes. We've seen this come up a few times, not tons, but a lot of post-secondary eligibility, especially for federal financial aid, is reliant upon that student completing secondary school, and that's often determined when the diploma is issued.
Okay, but so you're saying they would have to take their diploma. They wouldn't still be eligible if they have not taken their diploma.
Right. So to qualify, they must have completed secondary school, which is usually validated through the receipt of a high school diploma.
Okay,
Or-
well, they also have transcripts that say credits completed or things like that. So, because I know the colleges will accept them as fully matriculated students without having the actual diploma. So, but all right. They'll be disappointed. Thank you.
Yeah, no, if you have any particulars, I mean, I have my email address up there. Please reach out to me individually.
Okay.
And we can certainly talk through it offline.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
More questions in the chat. How long will the PACT process continue?
Like I said before, it is a state appropriated fund. I mean, it's a program that's required to be put forward. You know, when you get into the semantics of it, the funding is available for up to $14 million a year. So it's as long as there's funding, like many state funded programs.
And obviously the follow-up question is, can students entering the program this coming year expect PACT to continue for their 2 years?
I am going to say yes. I've said yes in every public forum that I possibly could. The other pitch I'll make, and we say this a lot too, is, please reach out to your local legislators for support of the program. If you have, individual stories of students and families that it's benefited, those do go a long way. And for program sustainability, for the economic prosperity of Connecticut, it is a big help. So anything you could do from that front would be wonderful.
And then there's another question. Once eligible, are they eligible for the 2 years of community service? I'm not sure if you know what that's about.
I don't, unfortunately. If you'd like to expand, I'll give you a minute.
Yeah, let me see if I can unmute Ms. Ghostlaw. Carla, your mic has been unmuted, so feel free to unmute and ask your question.
So the PAC, is it good for the first year or the 2 years of community? I guess I'm a little confused.
Sure. So the PACT program is available to students on a 4-year clock, and for 72 credits of earned credits. So the thing to remember though is while they have that durational period, a student can lose eligibility in the way. So for example, I use the example of, a student attends for a semester or 2 or 3, and then they drop out for a semester, and then decide to come back. because they didn't meet that continuous eligibility requirement, because they took that semester off, they would lose eligibility in the program. So it does require that a student is enrolled continuously in fall and spring semesters.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
And Karen, I see your point that you're in the school counseling office, but you're the college and career center coordinator. So you're not, I imagine you're saying that you're not a certified school counselor. So we're basically targeting anybody who's holding that certification. And Kim Traverso, our school counseling contact, is the one sending those communications. So if you're not a certified school counselor, then we don't actually have a mailing list for college and career coordinators such as yourselves, and perhaps we need to consider starting something like that so that we can actually do this type of communication to you and others across the state. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Oh. Okay, so Kelly is clarifying her question, and she's saying, my question was actually about the CEEB code, which is, I believe, the College Board's code for their high school. And it is incorrectly noted for our school where it is named in the CT States application.
So if you could just in the chat really quick, put down your school and then what the code should be. And I can get that to the right person.
This is a full service session, Stephen.
You know, we do it
awesome. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. And Benjola says, I'm a certified counselor, but learn for the training from my admin. So we will revisit that to make sure that all certified counselors are getting this this communication. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Right. Anyone else with a question? Again, feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand.
No, well, if questions do come up, I know my contact information's in there, and Ajit, I think we'll put this presentation up publicly.
We
So
will.
you'll all be able to see it and reach out if you do think of things. You know, usually it happens within the first 15 seconds of the call ending. So anytime, please reach out.
Yeah, and the presentation will be made available. We will take this session to turn it into a video, YouTube video, and then we'll attach the slide deck that Stephen shared today as part of that feed. So with that, I think we'll call the session to a close. Thank you so much again, Stephen, for a chance meeting, and here you are doing a session. Thank you so much. Yes. Really helpful, very clear answers, and thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.